was a soft start. So people in the audio format are hearing us as well, except that it's like it's it's a highly professional podcast. This one, there we go. People can hear things. Hopefully, there we go. Can everyone hear us in the chat? Give us a wave. There's people saying hello. Excellent, marvelous, good. Happy to see all that. Lots of waving. Yeah, we're mildly, chaotically starting a little late, but that's fine. That's fine. Oh, people can't see us. Oh, they always get unreassured. Let's do this. Here we are. I've described you, Edward, as a sleeper train insider extraordinaire. I hope that's all right. Hello, yes, everyone.
Right. Hi, Gareth.
Hello. So we've got. Oh, that's good. There's a nice crew joining us in the chat already. There we go. Everyone can hear the audio. Someone had it muted accidentally. Good stuff. Right, the first things first. I'm going to open this switchel. There's a switchel. It's apple and blackcurrant.
I've got this here.
Oh, lovely. What are you drinking? Do tell.
This is 4 pills, which is from. I live in Koblenz, which is on the Rhine, we're at the confluence of Rhine and Moselle, and this beer is from somewhere around here. So cheers.
Yeah, absolutely. Cheers. I'm on soft for some strange reason, but that looks delicious. I went to Koblenz once. I was very, very, very hungover, so I spent a lot of time in beautiful, stunning Koblenz with an excellent view from the confluence. You can look across to the other side of the Rhine, and there are so many freight trains that go through.
Yes, it gets quite loud actually.
Yeah, they kept waking me up from my hungover stupor. Yeah, I made mistakes. I regretted it. It was my last performance, I think, with the Music Society at the university, and I did percussion and then didn't say. Anyway, it was an embarrassing state of affairs. But it's a stunning city, absolutely beautiful. I just recovered enough to have a little run around at the end of our little trip there. Anyway, that's a terrible story. Everyone, we have Edward Schofield here. Capotreno Ed on Twitter. Have I got that right?
You got that right, yes.
Excellent.
Capotreno is Italian and means train manager.
Nice. Right, yeah. Well, without further ado, let's crack on. Actually, Ed, thanks for joining. I'm gonna mash buttons and be in control of things.
Yes.
I'm always reassured when that works. Ed, of course, can't actually hear the lovely theme tune and has to watch back to hear it. But anyway, as the 125 fades out...
See the British Rail trains, though.
That's it. You see it. You see the intro, and that's the important bit.
Yes, I saw an APT, I believe.
Yeah, there's and also a nasty-looking pacer. And there are a few people doing sad faces because of there's an Intercity 225 at the end, which has officially stopped its services up to Scotland, which is
yes, I heard about that. Yes,
I know lots of sadness going on in the chat. Anyway, hello everyone in the chat. Do send your questions through. We'll pick them up as we go through. We're talking about. I'll tell you what. Let's do small faces. We're talking about sleeper trains today. This is going to be fun. Before we get cracking, and apologies in advance for the brief rest for our guest. Let's talk about some things. First of all, it's not going to be the news. We're going to talk about. I'm going to very briefly put the Samaritans number up and just point out that it's okay to ask for help and actually put a request out to everyone watching today. Given that lockdown is lasting a long time and there's evidence that it's going to last a lot longer, there are still a lot of people working from home or trapped at home, not working. All of the above are potentially quite damaging for a lot of people's mental health, including my own. I've been feeling particularly bad this week. Just reach out. So everyone in the chat, if you've got someone you know, just reach out to someone, because they will be glad of you doing that. I can promise you that. And for anyone out there who's struggling, just don't hesitate to call the Samaritans number, honestly. Just call it. So that's the sober start, but I think it's an important point to make. So yes, do reach out and contact someone who you haven't for a while, because they'll be glad of it. Right, the news. There we go. So the news is that the Borders Railway is no longer new. It's now old. Officially, it's not a new railway. It's been around for 5 years. It opened 5 years ago today. Here's a nice picture of some pretty reverse curves and some Bod Geotechnical Engineering. This here it is, looking nice, and it has been an absolutely tremendous success. And I'm hoping that we have a huge amount of data associated with the scale of that success, so that we can basically show people that the current analysis for what demand looks like with a new railway is a load of rubbish. And we can just talk about the huge added value that a railway has for an area. So there's some really interesting little news stories that have come out today about how beneficial the Borders Railway has been for areas, for areas that didn't have a railway connection or used to have a railway connection. So businesses are like booming. It just changes the people's attitude of towns. Like if you've got a railway station, even if people don't actually take the train, it's just raising awareness as a place, as being a tourist destination. It's increased the sense of community in some of these areas. There's a really nice BBC piece that goes through it, and for me, it's just evidence that we need to move away from using cost-benefit analysis to analyse major strategic infrastructure decisions. That's not what they're for. They're for deciding on kind of miniature decisions, micro decisions. They are not for macro decisions, large-scale decisions. So anyone who tries to use them, anyone who tries to hit projects with a benefit-cost ratio and say, "Oh, it's not worth it," are charlatans. Anyway, so that's the sort of podcast we love to do. We love to, hit out at transport economics. Although decent transport economists make that point as well, to be honest. So most of the good transport economists I know on Twitter are like, "Stop using cost-benefit analysis for this stuff." Anyway, rant over. Oh no, not rant over, because after this, I think, is it 9:15? People in the chat can correct me. There's going to be a live stream of a journey up the line, which should be quite fun. I like the look of that. So go on to after this, head over to the YouTube, the ScotRail YouTube channel, to see more about that. That should be quite interesting. Next in the news, this has become a bit of a thing. I've started putting these in more regularly. The update of the data about rail usage, or generally transport usage during COVID. Oh, let's switch our faces off briefly so you can see there we are. So, as you can see, rail has had a bit of a weird numerically flickaroo, a bit of a drop, quite a major drop actually, down to about the 33% mark from where it was at 40% last week. So a bit of a hit. We'll see if that changes when the data gets updated, because it looks to me like there's a bit of some interesting statistical or data collection anomalies going on there. But if so, that's interesting to see why that's happened compared to, bus travel hasn't taken the same hit, which to me seems a bit strange. So, anything that would have impacted rail you'd have expected it to impact on bus services, and actually the bus service data is more reliable. Anyway, interesting. We'll see what happens. All of the cycling data has been revised as well, down a little bit, like down by about 5% across the board. So clearly there's been a bit of data. Someone's clearly got hold of the data set overall and been interrogating the quality of it. Anyway, interesting to observe. We'll keep watching that. What's the next thing we've got to say? So, well, let's bring Ed back, because we need to get Ed back. Here we are. Ed is here. We're talking about sleeper trains. I couldn't resist putting a picture of the sky, the night sky, with the word sleeper trains in front of it. It looks very dramatic. Before we do that, though, Ed, let's bring you. Tell us about yourself. Give us a bit of an introduction. What do you do? Why are you an authority on sleeper trains? Tell us.
Right, well, my name's Edward, and I'm very pleased to see you all here, and I'm very grateful to Gareth for inviting me onto the show today. I'm actually English, but I've grown up in Germany, and I live in Germany now. I grew up in Munich, and that is where I went to school and went to university, and that is where I joined the railways while I was at university.
Ah, interesting.
I did it along the side, actually. I joined the German night train service, City Nightline as it was then, as a student, and then somehow I ended up doing it full time, and I just managed to finish my degree by the skin of my teeth, and then I studied Russian linguistics, and there's not really much money to be made there. So
sorry to all the Russian linguists watching.
Yes. Anyway, but so all my university friends weren't getting any jobs, but I had this fabulous job which had me going to Paris and to Rome and to Venice every week and making enough money to live. So I stayed on the railways.
Oh, amazing.
Yes, and then 2016 Deutsche Bahn closed down its night trains, which was very, very sad. But this caused me to start my blog, railguideeurope.com, with which I help people, especially from America, but also from England or other English-speaking countries, find their way around Europe, getting better tickets. Because often I found that I'd have in one sleeper car, I would have some people who'd paid 60 euros for a berth in the sleeper, and then I'd have the Americans next door who'd paid 300 for exactly the same bed and quality and all. So my website is about helping people get better deals when traveling Europe by train. I also now work for another company, a private company that runs night trains, usually special trains, but so trains that people order. But the most interesting thing I'm doing at the moment is working on the Alpen-Sylt Night Express, which is a train from Sylt, which is in the very, very north of Germany, an island, in fact, all the way down to Salzburg. So I've worked that train as a train manager as well, but I'm also at the moment tasked with developing new breakfast and onboard services for this train. And so that's my night train cred.
Perfect. I think we're getting a bit of feedback on the mic, so you can probably let it hang. I think it might be all right. I think it might be all right. If not, I'll get you to hold it again. But that should solve the problems. Fantastic. Yeah. So it's like a dream job, isn't it, to be able to sort of whiz around left, right, and centre across Europe with.
That really was a dream job. Yes, I loved it.
Yeah. Oh, the sound's coming through perfectly as well. I think that's all right. So it probably saves your arm get RSI if you hold out the whole time. Cool. So, amazing. So a lot of people giving some Munich love as well, actually. So I had a trip to Munich and actually got the train down to Garmisch, which was quite nice as well. Sort of the amazing sort of wintry scene, sort of DB Regio sort of train making its way down. It was great. There is weird. There was this weird art exhibition going on. It was in the winter of 2009, and there was an art exhibition going on by an artist called Erwin Wurm, which was like, there were just all these adverts of like a gherkin on a pink background everywhere. And for some strange reason, the two things that stuck in my mind, one of them was like this incredible farmer's platter meal that I had in a proper classic sort of Bavarian sort of beer house. Yes. Huge long benches, and just this platter with like sausage, sauerkraut, just all the best stuff. Yes. Oh, bliss. But also these posters for Erwin Wurm, which just cracked me up because they were so surreal. Also the people surfing at the Englischergarten. That's also quite a vivid Munich thing.
On that wave,
that weird standing wave.
Yes.
Yeah, it's quite cool. Anyway, this isn't all about Munich. We should move on. So let's go back to the slides. So sleeper trains. Right, here's a map that's so small that no one can see anything, so I'm going to zoom in on it. Although it is interesting to point out how far north sleeper trains go, actually, because you've got them right down at the south, heading into Sicily, and then right at the top there, heading up to, I don't quite know what the furthest north one is, and this image is on Wikipedia, so you can find it quite easily. But that's a pretty decent northerly sort of sleeper train. But if I zoom in a bit on sort of Central Europe, it's not a bad little spread of sleeper services there, I think.
But if you look at Russia, it's, that map is actually missing all the Russian night trains as well. Because if you had the Russian night trains, the thing is in Russia most trains are actually night trains, and because they travel for such a long time that they just have a day mode and a night mode. And if you had the Russian night trains on that map, then you'd have stuff going even further north.
That's interesting. I wonder if this is just looking at things that go into. That cross the Russian border and go into Europe. Perhaps that's why they've excluded them. But
yes, absolutely.
There's a very satisfying looking straight line actually, which is from Paris down to it's even further south than Bari. So going right down the back of the Italian boot. That's a really satisfying one. I like that a lot.
Yes.
I know we're getting sidetracked already.
I went on that one last year, the one to Lecce.
Oh, is it down to Lecce? Oh, yeah, okay.
I can't. It's too small for me to see, but I think that's Lecce.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's not. It's too small for the image to pick up. It's a very high resolution image. It's like 6,000 pixels, which means that all the text is tiny. But I'll put a link to this image because it's quite a nice map, even if it possibly isn't perfectly accurate. That's quite good. I like that. And anyway, so right, I'm getting distracted. We're going to come back to this map. So there are, in the UK, 2 sleeper services, right? Here is this isn't actually the official branding. This is me mocking up what the branding would look like in some sort of parallel universe where there's unified branding across our railways, but I love it too much to avoid putting it in. So we've got the Cali Sleeper, which is actually formed of 2 different sleeper services, and then we've got the Night Riviera, which is, you can see in the back of the shot here. There's a diesel between, kind of just behind the HST, and that holds the Night Riviera. So those are the 2 UK ones, right? I don't know if there's anything particularly exciting about them. I don't know from your perspective. Do they have any particularly interesting or unique features?
Well, I've never actually been on either of them. I'd be very, very interested to go on them because English sleepers are just a little bit different from the standard European continental services, which I've grown up with and am used to and know very well. I believe both the Caledonian Sleeper and the Night Riviera, they have sleeping cars and seated cars, but nothing in between. Am I right?
Yeah, that's right. So there's no so there's no sort of halfway house. Pretty much,
Yes.
you either sat upright or you've got like a luxurious hotel style, frankly overpriced berth. There's no middle ground. Anyway, so that's those 2. We won't dwell on those because I think that's probably the sleeper services that most people in the chat are probably most familiar with. What we're more interested in, I think, is the stuff that's happening on mainland Europe. So if we go back to the map, which I'm going to do now, I think it's So let's go back to the map. Tell us a bit. So we've got this map up, and I kind of sprung this on you because you didn't send this through, and I sort of thought I'd include it out of interest. There are some interesting gaps on this map. So ignoring the lack of connection between the UK and the mainland Europe, which we'll come back to at the end, by the way. So hold all your why can't we have a connection to Europe questions. Hold them to the end. There are a few interesting gaps. So tell us about some of these gaps that you can see and where you think they've arisen from. France, for me, feels like an obvious one.
Well, France has been sabotaging night trains for an awfully long time now. So the Munich, Berlin, Hamburg to Paris night train, which I used to work on, even when it was 100% sold out, it still lost money because the French track access charges were so high.
Interesting.
Because SNCF absolutely hates loco-hauled trains. They much prefer EMUs. So they're all about TGVs, the French. And this trend might at last be turning. There has been news coming out of France that from the Macron administration that they want to get more night trains on track again. So it's very going to be watching France very, very closely to see what happens.
Okay, that's interesting. Because pre-COVID, there felt like there was a bit of a sleeper train renaissance going on. There felt like there were new services popping up, and I was getting very excited so I've got family over in Belgrade, and at the moment it is not a practical journey by rail, frankly. So I do fly. And it's
the Balkans are very, very difficult by rail. Very difficult. Especially anything that used to be Yugoslavia is very difficult.
Yeah, can confirm the tracks are a mess, and the services are strangely distorted thanks to civil war reasons. But there felt like this renaissance, and obviously COVID has been a bit of a hit. But do you think that renaissance is going to continue? Do you think there was a renaissance? Is that
I do. Well, actually, just another gap I want to mention is between Berlin and Paris. At the moment,
yes, yeah.
The only night train at the moment that runs between the only scheduled night train between Berlin and Paris, the 2 most important capital cities of the European Union, bar Brussels, is run by Putin's Russia.
Really?
Yes.
So is that this orange line here that's going, or is that something different?
I assume it is that one because the Moscow Paris Express passes through Berlin, and that goes it did go once a week before COVID. At the moment, this is one of the few services that hasn't returned yet. So that is the most that is the gap which I find most
bizarre. Yeah,
bizarre because you you would need I think there should be a night train service between Berlin, Brussels, and Paris.
It feels like a no-brainer. Absolutely, yeah. You'd run run a service
Yes,
to connect these major capital, kind of the core capitals of
yes.
Western Europe. Yeah. And then by connection, you'd then be able to get to all the other capitals, because obviously Berlin generally is an access point out to northeastern
Yes.
Europe.
Yes, and then but your other question was about the renaissance of night trains. So it was already underway, but I do think actually that the whole COVID thing is only going to make night trains even more relevant, because I think there's when COVID passes, there will be people will be wanting more environmentally friendly travel. I don't expect all the airlines to survive it, so that means that airline prices are quite likely to go up. And also, the train I work for at the moment, the Alpensilt Night Express, was in fact founded because of coronavirus, because my company wouldn't have had the spare rolling stock if coronavirus hadn't happened, because before we were using these carriages we had. The Alpensilt Night Express is a couchette only train, and we were using our couchettes for running open access Flix train services between Berlin, Hamburg, and Cologne. However, Flix train stopped cooperating with us during coronavirus, and so we had all these carriages standing around, and so we just started a pop-up night train. And what's different about this train is that we only sell entire compartments, which means people can keep their social distance and they don't have to wear a face mask when they're in their compartments. And I know that on the night jets as well, they don't make you wear a mask if you're in a compartment of your own. So suddenly compartments in general are going to become more interesting again, I reckon.
Yes, actually, and also so I suppose it's very exciting. One of the challenges is the cross-border element in terms of what that means in terms of different countries' quarantine rules, but that's
also this quarantine rule thing is also making it less attractive to go abroad. So one of the reasons the Alpensilt Night Express was able to start was because so many people in Germany are now holidaying in Germany.
Okay.
So it's suddenly made trains a bit more interesting from that perspective. Then you've also got an even more interesting train is RegioJet. RegioJet's night train from Prague to Rijeka. RegioJet is an open access private operator from Czechia, and they operate day mainline services in Czechia and Slovakia. They also reach Vienna now. And this summer they started a couchette service from Prague to Rijeka, which is actually a traditional summer holiday destination for the Czechs. And it's been a roaring success. They were going only 3 times a week, I believe, but then they had to increase it to every day, and it's done really, really very well.
Tremendous. All right, that's fantastic. Right, we've had a few questions, so I'm gonna, if you don't mind, I'll just ask a couple of these. Romy Adakrat asks, how hard is it to sanitize a compartment during COVID-19?
It's slightly more. It's slightly more work than you would normally do. So normally you would just vacuum, but in this case, all the surfaces which are touched frequently are wiped with disinfectant.
Interesting. Okay, so you're not talking about like twice the amount of time required. It's sort of
no. But I think I actually think on the whole, COVID has been good for cleanliness on trains. So the loos on trains have become so much better since COVID, haven't they?
Yeah, I think a few people will agree with that. Other than where they've just closed them off, because I think a lot of services have just closed the doors and locked them, which is a bit more disappointing. So let's have a look. There's a few other questions that I mustn't forget. So John, actually, this might be a question which we'll save until a later image, but John Christoph, you must remind me to ask this question, because it's about local haul versus multiple unit, which is a really interesting question, I think. But we'll come back to that one. Right, okay, in which case, because we're already at 26 minutes past, let's go into the next slide, which is we've been talking about couchettes, but I don't actually know what the difference between a couchette and a normal berth is. So I think that's what you're going to explain to us, actually, isn't it, Ed?
Yes, exactly. So I wanted to tell you about the standard mainland European night trains, and they usually have, broadly speaking, three different classes. They have seated cars, couchette cars, and sleepers. What you see here is a single sleeper in a night jet sleeping car.
Mm-hmm.
These are in fact the sleeping cars which I first trained on.
Ah, okay.
And this is a standard economy compartment with a little wash basin, which you can see on the right. It's not easy to see, but that wooden thing on the right is actually a small cabinet which you can open.
So this is the sink, right? This thing that's sort of sticking out here. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. And sleeping cars always have a proper bed and somewhere where you can at least wash your face and brush your teeth. This bed can have up to 3 beds. At the moment, it's configured for 1 bed, but if you, that yellowish
this thing here,
it's the middle bed, which is folded away, and up top, out of view, is the top bed. You can't actually see that.
Ah, so there's another one. There's another one up here somewhere.
It's theoretically possible to sleep 3 people in that.
Ah, interesting. Okay, yeah.
So
so that's a sleeper. So that's what a sleeper looks like.
Yes.
And then the next one we've got. What's this then?
This is a couchette. Couchette is from the French to lie down. It is essentially a carriage in which you can lie down, but you are not guaranteed sleep. Though usually you do sort of become unconscious at some point during the night. So it is much better than sitting up all night. There are usually 6 of these in one compartment. Up to 6 of these. You can you can book a couchette with you can book a 6-berth couchette or a 4-berth couchette. 4-berth couchettes are a tiny bit more expensive, but as there are only as the maximum occupancy is 4 people, it is quite a lot more comfortable and more spacious. In a couchette is a bunk which is sort of padded. It's not very, very soft, but it is padded to some extent, and you've got a clean sheet, a clean pillow, and a blanket to cover yourself up. These are usually mixed sex, but ladies can book a ladies' couchette, and then they'll only be put with women. In fact, I once had a very difficult situation on the night train when I had a transvestite who booked herself into the women's couchette, and then other women came and said they wanted and said there was a man in there. It was appalling, very, very difficult situation. But fortunately, I had another couchette and was able to make sure that the lady was able to be on her own. I was able to solve it in that case, but this is a thing which has this is quite an old system. So the ladies' couchette is at least from the 1960s or so.
Yeah, so it's a system that's possibly a little behind the times in terms of people. Yes. Yeah. So yeah. Okay. So we've got couchette, and then the next image is of. Yeah. Okay. So this is something different again.
Yeah, this is actually a seated car, and usually during the day these would be normal seats. But this is also a picture from the Austrian night jet. These carriages used to be standard in most trains that went overnight. You can pull the seats down, and then you form a big kind of little landscape on which you can then lie down. I remember when I was very small, when I went to England with my mother that was the late 1980s. I remember going on one of these from Frankfurt to Ostend, and then getting the jet foil as it was then, and we spent the night on one of these. And the night jet still has this, and this can be quite an interesting option for people who want to travel as cheaply as possible, though on the whole I would always recommend at least going for couchette.
So you've got so there's a sort of a it's still vaguely comfortable. When I was on the sleeper train going up to used to get the sleeper train up to the hills, and it would be me curled up on one of these, except that it didn't recline nearly as much as that. So there's still got a few bits and pieces there. Right, okay, so this is where I've dumped in a picture of my own, which is from India actually. So the last time I got on a sleeper, just to give an idea, so I think this counts as does this count as a couchette? I think it might do. Or do you think?
It's open plan, isn't it?
So this was what was known as Tier 1 AC, I think. So it had a bunch of curtains, but it is open plan.
Yes. In Russian trains have those as well. They're sort of the third class. I mean, they're basically come closest to European couchettes, I'd say. So it was a bit of a. We ended up getting turfed out halfway through by some angry people, and it was a bit of an interesting experience. Although I'd totally recommend it because, like, the views in the morning were just absolutely stunning. You just have these incredible views out of the train, which I have to say were a delight. Why did you get turfed out?
Oh, there was some confusion. We'd ended up. Basically, we'd got Tier 1 AC on a total blag in it, having not booked it in advance whatsoever. But the chap in the station was very helpful, sorted us out. But there was a family who had asked, at the start of the night, they'd asked in a fairly unclear way if they could move into our one and be spread so that they were all together. And so we consolidated a bit. And then someone else came in who decided they weren't happy with, and it ended up with some sort of rigmarole. And I ended up sort of sleeping in a different bed, and Dina was in another one. It was mild chaos, but it was part of the experience. And it meant that I had this sort of, I was in a longitudinal rather than a transverse sort of bed, and I got these lovely views in the morning, which was great. So I was quite happy. Anyway, yes. So enough of that. Let's go to It's one of your. So this is an interesting picture. Tell us about this. What's going on here, and why is this important?
So
I should. Sorry, before I do that, I need to do more better audio described. In front of us here is a picture at Brennero Brenner, which is actually it's Italian, so maybe that's the wrong pronunciation. Between Österreich, Austria, and Italy, there's lots of concrete on show because this railway appears to be in a cutting adjacent to an autostrada, and it's all very concretey and quite pleasing with some forest in the background. Yes, and there's some OLE and some railway tracks. So for all the people following on the podcast, hopefully that has created you the image of this that we're about to describe. So sorry, Ed, go on.
Right. So this is a picture from Brenner, which is from the Brenner Pass, which is the border station between Italy and Austria. Gareth asked me for wanted me to talk about the actual operation of night trains, the nuts and bolts, and so I thought I'd supply this picture. So we have the border here between Austria and Italy, and running night trains across borders is always rather complicated, and it's you really are reliant on the companies cooperating with each other. And so if if I would come with my night train from Austria, I'd have an engine which took 15,000 volts alternating current from the overhead lines, but in Italy they use 3,000 volts direct current. So coming from Austria, you'd come into Brenner, and then they'd have the overhead lines on 15,000 volts. Alternating current, then they switch them off, and then a little diesel engine comes and takes away the Austrian engine, and then comes an Italian engine with the Italian current, which then uses Italian signals. And the carriages, meanwhile, have to be equipped for all the different currents which they pass through. And what's interesting is that in the 1960s, they actually set out a standard which carriages would have to fulfill if they were to be used internationally, and this is what made it possible to have the most amazing network of night trains all over Europe. And what's actually very, very interesting is that in this time of the European Union and the Schengen Agreement, when there's hardly any borders, there are practically no night trains. Whereas during the Cold War, when there was the Iron Curtain, we had loads and loads of night trains, and you could just go to a ticket office in London and buy yourself a ticket to Athens, and you got it, and that was it. Whereas all these things are not possible anymore in this time of borderless travel.
Which is strange, isn't it? It feels it's such a bizarre thing that we've moved backwards, despite
yes,
the administration and also the ability to administer, having theoretically got a lot more straightforward.
Yes,
yeah.
So one of the big hurdles for night trains is having a train which can cope with, or which complies with all the various rules in various countries, and these have been diverging for quite a while. So Italy suddenly decided that they wanted it to be possible to control which side the doors opened on from an Italian engine, and German carriages weren't equipped to do this. So that was a time when the German night trains to Italy almost had to be cancelled.
This is the advantage, the massive advantage of following the TSIs and having that as a baseline, so that you can have an interoperable system, because it is doolally. It's a bit like this to me, and the multi-voltage thing across Europe is, for me, it's a bit like, for the OLE people, the overhead contact system people, for those in Europe, OCS. It's a bit like the gauge issue, the gauge war in the UK back in the 1840s and 50s. You know, the fact that the railway is a system. And systems need to be interconnected. It's a system of systems, and deciding that those systems can't work together is doolally. One of the things that a few people are curious is why you can't have a dual voltage locomotive, so that you don't have to pull it off and
Well, you can.
waste time.
You can. So, for instance, the night jet from Munich and Vienna to Venice. It crosses into Italy through not at Brenner, but at Tarvisio, which is further east, and they have an engine, a Taurus engine, which can do both. So it can run both under 15,000 volt alternating current and 3,000 volt direct current.
And of course, there's signalling interoperability to think about, and all the a few people pointing out it is an immensely complex. It's an immensely complex process. But the key thing, the thing that we should hope that everyone is striving for, engineers, systems operators, infrastructure managers, should be, train operators, should all be aiming for an interoperable system, because it only allows more of these services to run, and that means more railways, which more railway travel, which is good for the environment. Sorry, it's all right, you're back. You blipped out there for a second, but we've got you back.
Oh, thank God. That's good.
Yeah, it's all right. So, crikey, lots and lots of interesting questions. Lots of people pointing out, Brian Munro, for example, pointing out that systems really ought to have interoperability, and they get dealt with in IT all the time, and rail transport has to deal with it as well. Some people pointing out, do we not have the technical standards of interoperability? So the technical specifications for interoperability are the European TSIs, as they often get referred to. Yes, they do exist, but the trouble is that they're a target that people are aiming for, but the standard doesn't mean that everyone's complying with it yet. We're still a way to go on quite a few systems. So it's not just about load and gauge, as people in the UK seem to be fixated on. Anyway, so yeah, lots of nice chat in the going on, lovely stuff. If you want to, for anyone in the chat, just at my name in, because it comes up in red and it's really easy for me to spot questions. Yes, there was a question there. David Shepherd, yes, this is the edge of Italy upon the wall. People are wondering whether that crack in the concrete is where Italy is the line where Italy and Austria are separated on the map. That'd be nice,
Actually,
wouldn't
no, it's not. The whole thing is Italy. The Austrian border is quite a bit further
it?
left.
Okay, that's interesting. But I suppose it makes sense for it all to be on one side, and actually you just pass sort of reasonably inconsequentially across the border a bit further away.
It's about 5 minutes on foot to the Austrian
So it's
border.
not too
Then,
far.
no.
Yeah, so okay, so good stuff. So there's a lot to think about. So that's a lot about the technical elements, so of rolling stock particularly, but also infrastructure to have to deal with. So the next picture, I think, this is a fun one. Right, what on earth is going on here? For those who are listening to this, this is a picture of a Deutsche Bahn coach with a gentleman's bottom and feet sticking out of one window with high vis and a little ladder. Please tell me what's going on here, Edward.
Yes. So this was in 2013 when there was a terrible storm in Germany, and Rosenheim, which is in southern Bavaria, which is where the night train from Rome to Munich had to pass through, was flooded. And what then happened was the night train coming from Rome only got as far as Verona, and then had to be cancelled. And I was in fact at home that day, and I turned up at the office for some small training course. But then they said they needed someone to fly to Italy to look for our train because no one knew where it was. So I went back home, got all my stuff and my whole uniform and all my equipment, and then I was drafted on. So I was made into a task force and sent to Italy by plane to Bologna to go and look for our train. And then we arrived in Bologna, got in a taxi, then went to Bologna station, and then which was where our train had last been heard of. And luckily, by chance, I then saw one of my Italian colleagues who I knew well, and then I got him to take me to the station master. And then the station master made a few phone calls, and then they told us where it was, and so we had to get a taxi to somewhere really, really far outside Bologna. And then we found the train, and then when we got to the train, we realised we'd forgotten the keys for getting into the sleeper carriage. So that's why we had to open the window from the outside, and I had to climb through. And so this is me doing that. And then we spent the whole next week in Italy with this night train because the line was closed, and so it wasn't a week. It was 4 or 5 days of crisis management because the train would be taken to Rome, and then we'd get all the people on, and then we'd take them as far as Verona or I think Brennero, and then they'd all have to pile onto a bus, and then our train would be taken back to Italy again and back into Italy again, and so that's how we spent a week. And eventually we ran out of everything, so bedding and mainly bedding, but also toothbrushing water and things like that. And so it's just a picture of what goes on behind the scenes.
What goes on behind, the glamorous life. Yeah, that's it.
Yes.
So we've had a very good question, a very interesting question, I think, or an important question from David Shepherd, which is relating to step-free access. So obviously a lot of the rolling stock we've seen is quite old, and also European rolling coaching stock is often not particularly accessible because it's often designed for, it often has steps at the vestibule end. So what provisions are made for particularly people in wheelchairs, but more broadly people with mobility issues, getting on and off sleeper train stock?
A lot of there are carriages which have been adapted for this. So my company, which runs the Alpensilt Express, we've got a couchette carriage with a special compartment which is wheelchair accessible. The door is a bit wider, and it is still quite high up, which means that you have to have you need to be lifted up on a platform. But every German station has one of these special platforms for lifting up wheelchairs. And this compartment also has a wheelchair-accessible loo right next to it.
Okay,
And
yeah.
the carriages are in fact made in the 1960s. So that particular couchette is made in the 1960s, but they were adapted in the early 2000s for wheelchair accessibility. The difficulty is that there's only one of these compartments in each train service, and that is something which I find very hampering and frankly not acceptable. That only one person in a wheelchair can travel with their wheelchair. Really, I wish very much that we'd be able to come up with something a bit more for accommodating a bit more people.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the ultimate aim, and this is challenging when you have lots of different platform heights, but the ultimate aim is that you have an entirely independent. So each coach, or at least the majority of coaching stock, is actually accessible for all, and so they don't. There's almost not an issue. Someone in a wheelchair or with a mobility impairment can just get on the train without really thinking twice about it. The challenge for that is that there's a lot of rolling stock that would need to be designed and procured, and managing different platform heights, because there are lots and lots of different platform heights to a much greater dramatic level than the UK across Europe, is clearly a significant challenge. But hopefully it's one that, in particular, I suppose the market drives this. So if there is a much greater demand for sleeper trains across the UK, across Europe, then you may see this. A desire to procure more rolling stock. That kind of leads me on to John Christoph's question from a long while ago, which is a really good one, which is, to what extent do sleeper trains have to be local hauled, or could you have multiple unit, or indeed are there multiple unit sleeper trains out there?
I think in China there are multiple unit sleeper trains, high-speed multiple unit sleeper trains. I've read about them, but I can't remember any. I can't remember seeing any pictures. But that sort of thing does exist, and I think I don't know. It's possible people might make those.
I suppose it depends on the generations of rolling stock that become available. So, for example, you could use the older, some of the first or perhaps second generation high-speed trains, and have those converted for use on the high-speed network as sleeper trains.
What would have been nice would have been if the old Eurostar stock had been, if one had somehow found a way to convert those, because then you would have had trains that were already had the
multi-voltage
and were approved for the tunnel and for France and for the UK. Then you could have had those going from the UK very, very deep into Europe, into mainland Europe. But these were quite a few of these have already been scrapped.
It's a shame that they've got. I mean, I understand that they're highly complicated machines and they're built to a gauge that they don't need to be restricted by anymore. But it is a shame that they haven't been exploited to create something new and interesting. But there we go. Apologies to everyone in the feed. I forgot to put my main bedroom light on, so it's a bit dark in here. But you're seeing me in a bit of an eerie sort of background. So highly professional outfit here. Okay, so there's quite a few questions coming through about various bits and pieces about scissor lifts and all sorts of things. But I think, certainly German stations have generally I think all of them have that lift to allow, because these are standard Deutsche Bahn coaches. I can't remember what the.
Well, these are not just standard Deutsche Bahn coaches. These are standard RIC coaches.
Okay, so they're pan-European standard.
Internazionale delle Carrozze, and that these are standards which were in. I think they came up with them in the 1930s, but these are the oldest carriages are from the 1960s, but they all adhere to the standards which allow them to be sent throughout the RIC carriages, the RIC countries.
Oh, yeah, interesting. Right, so conscious of time. What's next? Okay, so this is an interesting photograph. Tell us, first of all, on screen we have, and you might be able to embellish this. In fact, which station are we at? Where is this? This is
Krakow in Poland.
This is Krakow, and so it's quite an interesting sort of modern-ish looking station. We've got quite a retro-looking locomotive with this sort of horizontal piping, but actually looks like it looks clean and tidy, so probably had a bit of a refurb. Nice bright lights,
Absolutely.
nice classic looking pantographs. The diamond pantos, and there's a nice EMU in the background as well. Or is it an EMU? Maybe it's a DMU actually
Yeah,
in
it's
the
a
background.
flirt.
Oh,
It's
it's
a
a flirt.
flirt.
Lovely, nice Stadler unit, marvelous. And then some white and red coaches. There's a someone with a whistle or a cup of tea in
That's the Polish Guard.
yeah. In the foreground, and everything just looks it's quite an atmospheric photo. There's that feeling of a sleeper train just about ready to go. The platform looks empty, a couple of doors open perhaps, but it's quite an exciting feeling. It certainly was the case. It's always the case whenever I've got a sleeper. Most of the sleepers I've got are up to the Scottish Highlands, and I'm sat in the seated coach. But there was always a sense of anticipation as the train creaked silently forwards. That was always good. So tell us about this photo. What's going on here?
Well, this is a photo from one of the most exciting trains I ever had the pleasure to run as a guard. It was already with the company I work for now, Bahn Touristic Express, who are specialised in special and charter trains. And this was a train from Paris to Auschwitz, and it left Paris it took almost 20, I think it took just over 24 hours to complete this trip. It left Paris in the afternoon and got to Auschwitz in the very early evening. And what it illustrates is the route we had to go with this train was we couldn't go directly from France into Germany because neither France nor Germany had engines that could get the train across the border. So it had to go from Paris into Switzerland at Basel. Then at Basel we had in Basel we had to have a Swiss engine for a very, very short time. So from Basel SBB to Basel Bad. Then in Basel Bad we then got the German engine, and then the train went through the night through Germany to Passau, and then from Passau then into Austria, via Vienna to Břeclav into Czechia, and then from Czechia into Poland. So it's an amazing journey through.
Yeah, incredible.
Through lots of countries with 5 different engines, and the carriages are built for this. They can do it. They all worked and they can take the voltage. But this was a really long running classical night train where we just changed the engines and you had all the different countries working together to make the train run, and that was something that was really nice. And what I particularly love about international night trains is how when you get to a new country, the new railway staff come on.
Oh, really?
And talking to them and co-op and helping them run your train is very, very gratifying. And
yeah,
that's why I brought this picture.
Yeah,
along.
it's. I mean, how easy is it to coordinate the locomotive changes and things like that? Is it something that is just has to be you just hope that locomotive is sat there waiting at the station to kind of hook up?
Yes, it has happened before that we got to the border and the engine wasn't there yet. In fact, on that particular trip, we got to the Polish border and the engine wasn't there yet, so we ended up delayed by about an hour.
Crikey, yeah. It's such a. I mean, those long sleeper trains for me are always, certainly in the UK, they're the longest passenger trains that we run. So there's always this wonderful sort of long clacking of coaches passing, and they often take circuitous routes because they don't need to go. Okay, in Europe actually they do need to do more direct routes because they've got longer distances to travel. But in the UK, they quite often end up nipping off onto the odd diversion route where it's the driver's able to, and it's just there's a wonderful magic associated with them. They are fascinating sorts of journeys. So let's have a what's the next one? Right. So I knew that people would want to ask this, so I've put an image up of this is the channel and some people waving their hands. This isn't actually this is looks like the maintenance tunnel in the middle actually. That it's a bit of a weird one because that yeah, it's got to be the central service tunnel. Anyway, let's not digress. Presumably before they got rid of the tracks underneath, so they could drive things back and forth on it. In any case, right, everyone, ask your questions about pan-channel sleeper services. I will ask the question that so many people have asked, which is, firstly, why isn't there currently a sleeper service between the UK and the European mainland?
Well, one of the difficulties is getting rolling stock which can be approved for the very, very stringent safety safety regulations for the Channel Tunnel. But I read an article recently by, I think it was on Twitter. I read something that someone had written who had really worked very, very hard on starting a sleeper service through the Channel Tunnel, and his main problem was actually UK immigration. So, UK immigration said that any station at every station where they stopped, they'd have to have a Eurostar style terminal, which is just you couldn't possibly persuade other railway infrastructure managers to build these, because why should they make this exception just for the United Kingdom?
Absolutely, yeah.
But I didn't know about this before. I just thought it was mainly just the tunnel security and French protectionism because of the French wanting to keep it to themselves and wanting to have just Eurostar running through it. So I think, and also it came at the Channel Tunnel was built just before air travel was deregulated, and then air travel was deregulated, and then everyone just started flying everywhere.
Yeah, it did certainly. Yeah, in terms of through in the early 90s when the original night the Night Star stock that most of which is now in Canada. That stuff was intended to run, and then it was also connected not just to the sleeper services but also to regional Eurostar services, not sleeper services. And you're right, it just came at the point when EasyJet and a load of other budget flyers had started buying a load of cheap 737s or Airbuses and running very cheap European services that just essentially negated the need for that service. And this is where COVID is interesting, because you've got this push to reduce the number of kind of internal European flights where there's a decent rail service paralleling. And so maybe that does not so much perhaps for there continue to be serious practical reasons why there cannot be a sleeper train through the channel. As you say, rolling stock and customs are the two main kind of issues. But the climate at the moment is just doesn't favour it. So you need two things to change, which are very, very difficult to change. And one is you would need French railway policy would have to change, which is not very likely, and then UK immigration policy would also have to change, and that seems even less likely. Yes, we're on a somewhat opposite trajectory to that, and a lot of people say, well, why can't you check these things on the train? The reality is that the stupidly renamed UK Border Force just wouldn't have it. They want to have full facilities in stations. Yes, you probably could have immigration checks on the train, particularly for a sleeper service where it's not quite the number of there are a smaller number of passengers, easy to work your way through the train between stops. But that just
also in other countries it's normal as well.
Yeah, so, exactly. So, but unfortunately, the UK it just won't cut it. Our government is not interested. The Home Office is not interested. So so there you go. Really, that's why. So it's a hashtag abolish the Home Office sort of situation, I think. Get rid of the Home Office, and you might find that we can. You might find there's some change. But until then, yes. And some people are pointing out Brexit does screw everything. Yeah. So that's. Hopefully that answers your questions on. In fact, there are several questions related to that coming up. So yeah, there's some good discussions. There's some people optimistically saying, well, when we eventually do join Schengen, I mean that probably will happen in about 15 years. But we've got some internal political battles to go on before that happens here. So did I stick? And right, okay. So anything else you want? Let's tell you what. Let's get Ed. Nice big full screen Ed. There we go. It's very dark in here. Apologies for people trying to work out why it's so dingy and creepy in here. Ed, thanks so much. Anything else you want to add? That's been a fantastic, fascinating little kind of journey through sleeper train operations.
Well, I've written quite a lot about night trains on my blog. So if I could somehow put the link to my
what I'll do is you can send me after, and I'll stick it into the chat, into the description of the video, so that people can find it.
Then you can see all my work on night trains. So I've recently posted a post about the train I'm working on at the moment, which is the Alpensilk Night Express. But then I got 13 hacks for sleeping on any night train. Then I wrote about the Astra Transcarpatic night train, which is in Romania. And that is also a privately run night train, which they started in 2017 or so, run by Astra, who make rolling stock. So it was a company that made rolling stock, and they decided to run a night train with it.
That's interesting. Oh, yeah. So head over to them. Well, I'll put the link in the description for everyone. Head over and have a read. That sounds absolutely fascinating. Right. So we've got some, as usual, we'll close out with some ads and general pluggings. So, firstly, thanks to everyone who's joined us in podcast form, and indeed you can go down to iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and the other one, the boxy, colourful one, and listen at your leisure. Thanks. Always give me feedback on how terrible a job I do of audio described. I always do my best to make sure I've described everything on screen, but mixed success as ever. What else? Patreon. So head to Patreon if you want to vote on future RailNatter themes and generally get kind of inform what RailNatter does and kind of other stuff that I do. But also there's PayPal if you want to just dump if you want to do a specific. Oh, that was nice. Here's £2. Then you can do that on PayPal as well. So thanks for everyone who does that. Indeed, thanks to all Patreon supporters. New thing, which is, I don't know what it is really. It's Discord. No idea. But it exists now, and you can find it. There's a RailNatter Discord. I have no idea how you find it, but presumably if you search RailNatter in Discord, you can find it. Or there's a permalink that's on. I could try. Probably put it in the description, maybe. But also you can, if you're a Patreon supporter, you get exclusive stuff in the Discord as well. Like you can prod me in the chat, and we chat about future episodes. So Discord, whatever that is, there is one now. Also plugging. I was on Well, There's Your Problem podcast. If that's your cup of tea, which it ought to be because it's brilliant. Talking about the Great Heck derailment. So if you want to hear, if you want an irreverent look at that with the brilliant crew at Well, There's Your Problem podcast, then do that because it's 2 hours long. So if you really want some long form podcast, that's where you want to go. There are slides also. It's not it's not a copycat. RailNatter is not a copycat format. I promise. And lastly. Oh no, not quite lastly, but also lastly. Googling RailNatter Discord works apparently. Go and vote for progress. avantiwestcoast.co.uk/pride. If you want to make sure that, or increase the chances that the train gets called Progress, which I think is a very good idea, then do that. And the last thing I think is what's happening next week. It's going to be another just me one. Apologies, because guests are more fun than just me. In any case, the episode 27 is going to be 100 ways for railway rails to fail. So I'm just going to talk about ways that railway rails can disintegrate, squish, burst into flames, disappear, shatter like glass, and/or a variety of other ways that rails can disintegrate. Hopefully that'll be interesting, and I will see you next week for that. But in the meantime. It only remains really to say for Ed and I to bid you cheer. Ed, that's been fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Good stuff. And the chat has enjoyed it very much. Lots of chat. There's some career questions in there. Jack, I will answer the career question because I always like a career question. Any advice on getting into the rail industry? Yes, go and do some Googling, go into the Network Rail website, particularly they have quite a good jobs website. They give you an idea of the sorts of things you need in terms of background and thing, but also hit me up on Twitter and I can give you more detailed answer. Or Discord, there's a career channel in the Discord where loads of people have got lots of advice. Anyway, Ed, that's been brilliant. Thank you so much. Everyone in the chat, thank you. You've been brilliant. Patreon supporters and everyone, you've all been brilliant. It only really remains for the two of us to sort of say cheerio. So, yeah, cheerio, everyone. Cheerio. Cheerio.